Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Spinnaker Piccard reference SP-5098. This is a new release and it will be available on spinnaker-watches.com from the 28th of January for $550 US. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the watch comes in a watch box which is protected by this cardboard outer sleeve, which one removes. And this is the watch box itself. So one removes the lid, the watch is protected by this foam panel, and as you can see the watch sits on a padded pillow cushion as one would expect. So it does suffice in protecting the watch in shipping, and it is very aesthetically pleasing. With regards to the other items, one gets this plastic warranty card, and I'm pleased to report that the Piccard is covered by a 2-year international guarantee, which is very reassuring. One also gets this owner's instruction manual booklet, and lastly one also gets this Spinnaker tag. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is a new release from Spinnaker and it will be released on the 28th of January. So this is the Spinnaker Piccard reference SP-5098. The watch is available in 3 dial colour options, green, blue and black respectively. With regards to dimensions, we have a 45mm case diameter, we have a 52mm lug-to-lug measurement, and we have a thickness of 21mm. The lug width is 22mm, and the bracelet tapers from 22mm at the lugs down to the 2-button push flip-lock clasp. As you can see, the flip-lock clasp is signed to a high standard with Spinnaker engraved. Now, as always, I'm going to be critical of it only having 3 micro adjustment holes. I would like to see Spinnaker improve upon this, lengthen the clasp and have 4 micro adjustment holes to allow for better fine tuning of the bracelet length. Now the other thing I would like to see an improvement upon is the gauge of metal, because as you can see it's a very thin gauge of metal, and I would like to see a heavier gauge of 316L grade stainless steel used for the 2-button push deployment. There is another negative, there is no scallop for one's index finger nail or thumbnail to scoop underneath the flip lock, and I think that could further be improved with the addition of a recessed scallop. Now with regards to the interior, solid 316L grade stainless steel milled clasp, brass satin finish to the top side, underside and flanks, finished to a good standard. However, there is another negative to the clasp. This is a $550 watch, and it is wholly unacceptable to have a pressed metal stainless steel diver's extension link at this price point. At $550, the industry standard is it should be a solid milled stainless steel diver's extension, not a light gauge of metal pressed stainless steel diver's extension, as you can see. So this is a real disappointment, and I think it would be better had they deleted this abhorrent diver's extension link rather than putting a poor quality one within the body of the clasp. So with regards to the rest of the specification, we have a double dome sapphire crystal, and it has clear AR coating on the underside, and as you can see, due to the thickness and the high profile of the double dome sapphire crystal, the AR coating is needed. Now the anti-reflective coating does do a good job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the pencil hands. They have a matte silver finish to the hands, and the sweeping second hand has a contrasting orange tip to it and also a Lume pip. Now it is actually very difficult to read the dial due to the thickness of the double dome sapphire crystal. I think they've made a mistake by using a crystal which is too thick. Now I appreciate this is a 550 metre water resistant piece, and clearly Spinnaker are trying to demonstrate with the Piccard their watchmaking capabilities, that they can make a watch that can withstand 550 metres of pressure, and it has a helium escape valve. So they're trying to make a credible deep sea diving watch, but really I think they've overdone it with this double dome sapphire crystal, because it's too tall, too thick, and there's too much distortion even though it's double domed rather than being single domed. And even with the AR coating, as you can see, there is a lot of distortion, there's a lot of glare, and it's a highly reflective piece. The date complication is framed at 3 o'clock, and we have a black date wheel with white Arabic numerals. Now another criticism I have is the framing of the date complication is slightly offset. It's not central, it's slightly offset to the left due to the thickness of the rehort underneath the very tall double dome sapphire crystal. They should have made the frame thinner and also moved it to the right slightly, because if you look at the date complication, the date wheel it's slightly too far to the right rather than being central in the framing. So they should have either moved the frame to the right or alternatively reduced the size of the rehorse, and that would have allowed for the frame to be complete. It could have been extended to the right and better centred on the date complication. So there's room for improvement on the alignment of the framing on the date complication. With regards to the crown, it's a solid 316L grade stainless steel crown, coin edge finished and embossed with the Spinnaker brand emblem, as you can see. So let's test the crown action. Now the crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 550 metres of water resistance, which is very impressive. Absolutely silky smooth. The thread interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube are very good. Minimal friction, it feels smooth. Now, it's a characteristic of the movement used, the Seiko NH35A automatic. It pops the winding stem out of the movement with a spring-loaded action. So in the first position, it's the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the NH35A to top it up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. Absolute pleasure to feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication position. And if you look closely at 3 o'clock, you can see the quick set complication works as one would expect. It clicks over to the next day with a nice positive click. Pulling it out to the second click position is the time setting position. Nice light resistance, which is a characteristic of the NH35A, so it's an absolute pleasure to set the time. No backplay whatsoever, it feels like a very good movement. The movement has hacking. If you look at the contrasting orange tip second hand, you can see I've now hacked the movement and stopped the second hand dead, so it's possible to set the movement, the time, precisely to the second. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click and that restarts the movement. So let's test screwing it back down. Immediate thread pickup, this is excellent crown execution. Now, there's firm resistance to the H35A. One has to really push the winding stem back into the movement. It's got a really spring-loaded feel to it, but the thread interface is very good, so there's an immediate thread pickup and it's silky smooth. It screws down tightly with no resistance. Now, with regards to the bezel, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, nice chamfer machined to the top edge, brush satin finish, coin edge finished, solid stainless steel. 120 click unidirectional bezel as one would expect, and we have a ceramic bezel insert which is engraved with minute ticks and Arabic numerals and inlaid with a C3 Superluminova Lume triangle. Personally, I think Spinnaker have made a mistake with this. I think they should have inlaid the engraving in the ceramic with either white paint or alternatively C3 Superluminova to make the bezel fully Lume ceramic, because it's actually hard to read. It's not very legible with just engraved minute ticks and Arabic numerals. I think that it needs either white paint or Lume to improve the legibility. But I do like the triangle Lume at 12 o'clock, and I think that was the correct decision over using a conventional Lume pip. So let's test the bezel action. Good firm resistance to it. It's a good stiff bezel action. Nice positive loud audible clicks. I like the resistance of it, and it feels even all the way through the 360 degrees of rotation. No lateral side-side play, no back play whatsoever. It's a good tight bezel action. In terms of resistance, it feels very similar to a Steinhardt Ocean 1, if you're familiar with that, or alternatively a Seiko SKX 007. It's got that kind of firm ratcheting mechanism. So let's just check the alignment. Perfect alignment. The Lume triangle aligns perfectly with the 12 o'clock index on the dial. So, with regards to the rest of the specification, we have a screw-down stainless steel caseback, which also provides an effective hermetic seal to 550 metres of water resistance, finished to a high standard, and as you can see, the mirror-polished embossing details the bathyscaphe Trieste submersible, and that's nice detail, and it fits with the aesthetic of this being a deep-sea dive watch, having the bathyscaphe Trieste submersible embossed on the caseback. The specification is engraved to the circumference and concentric lathe tool turning finish to the rest of the caseback. Matte bead blasted effect to the centre section, which contrasts very well with the embossing of the submersible. So it's a very well executed caseback, but it is very thick, and of course that is necessary to withstand 550 metres of pressure. So with regards to the end links, solid end links, and they are a good tight fit to the case, and the finishing of the end links is done to a good standard. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelet, but I have adjusted it to position 1 of the 3 micro adjustments, and again I think that Spinnaker could improve upon this with 4 micro adjustments, or alternatively add some half links in the bracelet, because it is difficult to get the correct fit with this bracelet because there are no half links, there are only full links in the bracelet. So as you can see, it's an incredibly tall piece, and it does wear with wrist presence because it is a 45mm case diameter. It's also got a relatively long lug-to-lug measurement of 52mm. Now bear in mind, I have a large 8-inch wrist, and even on my 8-inch wrist, this is an incredibly large piece, both in terms of diameter and also lug-to-lug measurement, as well as the height of the piece. This is a very tall piece. 21mm is excessive, so needless to say, this isn't going to slip easily underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. It's not a practical daily wear piece. Now the other thing to note is it is an incredibly heavy piece. The heft of this piece, with all the links in the bracelet, is 252 grams, which is excessive. On a 22mm bracelet, it really still feels like a top heavy piece. It doesn't feel balanced, and although looking at the proportions, the taper of the lugs in the 22mm bracelet does balance the 45mm head of the piece visually, but in terms of how the watch feels, it feels very top heavy, it feels very tall due to the double dome sapphire crystal and also the tall case. It has slab sides, as you can see. So it's uncomfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. It really does feel too heavy. Really, I regard circa 150 grams to be the sweet spot for 40 to 42mm watches on oyster bracelets. 252 grams is over 100 grams heavier than a 40 or 42mm dive piece on an oyster style bracelet. So really, that's 100 grams of excessive heft is noticeable on the wrist. It really does feel like a heavy, uncomfortable piece. And unfortunately, the heft is exacerbated. It's compounded by the long lug-to-lug measurement, the tall piece, and also the fact that the head of the piece, the diameter, is very large at 45. I think that Spinnaker should have reduced the proportions of this piece. They should have reduced it to 20mm lug width, reduced the head of the piece from 45 down to 42, and of course reduce the height of the double dome sapphire crystal. 21mm really is far too tall, and also the slab sides of the head of the piece are also too tall. So let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. This uses Swiss C3 Supernova, which is very top grade Lume. Nice bright green tone to the C3 Supernova. The pencil hands are very well lumed with 5 or 6 layers of C3, as you can see. Easy to differentiate between the hour hand and also the minute hand, because the minute hand is clearly longer. And I like the contrasting orange sweeping second hand, which has a Lume pip on it. As you can see, one can see the second hand sweeping around the dial. The inlaid lumed triangle on the ceramic bezel insert works very well. One can clearly orientate the dial and the bezel position. So it's very good quality Lume, and I'm pleased to see Spinnaker haven't cut any corners with regards to the quality of the Swiss C3 Supernova they're using. So the absence of the index at the 3 o'clock position is a disappointment, and I think, bearing in mind that they have got the alignments in terms of the position of the framing of the date complication incorrect, I think they should have deleted the date complication on this piece and simply used an index at the 3 o'clock position rather than a date complication, because it spoils the symmetry. And the reality is, with the thickness of the double dome sapphire crystal and the fact that the date complication is offset due to the thickness of the rehort, really it's negligible having a date complication on this piece. If it's meant to be a deep sea dive watch, it really doesn't need a date complication. I think it would be better with an index at 3 o'clock as opposed to a date. So as you can see, it's continuing to glow for a good length of time, and it's glowing brightly, so the Lume is very satisfying. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. You'll all be familiar with the Seiko NH35A Automatic. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement which has 24 joules. It runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which is useful complications, and it has a 40-hour power reserve, which is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy of the NH35A is -20 to +40 seconds per day, which is a rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that this one is very well regulated and it's running consistently at +6 seconds per day, which is perfectly acceptable for an NH35A. Now, with regards to the movement, I think Spinnaker should have improved the quality of the movement and upgraded to a PT5000, alternatively a Sellita SW200-1. $550 really, an NH35A is not acceptable at that price point. It needs to be a higher grade of movement to justify the price point. So with regards to the specifications and the quality of the finishing, I think there's room for improvement with the specifications. Most notably, the clasp is the main disappointment of the watch. The gauge of metal is too thin, the abhorrent pressed metal diver's extension link, and only 3 micro adjustment holes. So really, the watch is let down by a poor quality clasp. Also, at this price point, it should have screw pins in the bracelet rather than push pins. Push pins are another clear cost-cutting measure. But having said that, it does have female pivoted end links. Now, the negative of the female pivoted end links is they're negligible, as you can see. This is the maximum amount of articulation that the female pivoted end links give. And it really does need female pivoted end links because this is a long lug-to-lug measurement of 52mm. The sweet spot for lug-to-lug measurement is 48mm. I always refer to this in my reviews. 48mm is the perfect lug-to-lug measurement, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist, respectively. So they made the correct decision by using female pivoted end links, but unfortunately they don't articulate very well. They don't move underneath the case, and really that isn't enough movement. It's like having male end links which are fixed. The female pivoted end links are negligible. The quality of the finishing to the head of the piece is very good. Beautiful luster to the flanks of the case, as you can see. So the quality of the brushed satin finishing throughout is done to a high standard on the head of the piece and also on the bracelet. But really another disappointment is the lack of white paint or C3 Superluminova inlay in the engraving in the ceramic bezel insert. So there's room for improvement in several areas. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meets 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the price point is $550. I think that the quality is acceptable, but I'm not going to say it's good quality and I'm not going to say it's excellent quality because there are too many cost-cutting measures at $550. Now, with regards to the value, I'm going to describe the value as poor value because really this clasp is not acceptable on a $550 watch. It would be acceptable on a watch costing $100, but it really is a poor quality clasp for a $550 watch. And the other cost-cutting measure is the Seiko NH35A. Again, the NH35A is acceptable in a watch costing $100, such as a Pagani design. But this is $550, and at that price point one has to have either a PT5000 or an SW200-1. The NH35A just isn't high grade enough for a $550 watch. So overall I'm going to say the quality is I would say acceptable, and I would say the value is poor. So for that reason I cannot recommend the watch to you for your consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Spinnaker Piccard reference SP-5098. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.